Chance at what? To kill us all? All right, if that's what you want, I'll get my chance.
The Naked Spur wasn't just another Western, it was a psychological breakdown on horseback. A film where the hero wasn't heroic and the mountains wanted everyone dead. Filmed at 11,000 feet with no studio, no backup plan, and a star who was terrified of horses, this production pushed boundaries nobody knew existed. These are 20 weird facts about the Naked Spur. And the bonus? Jimmy Stewart's darkness went so deep, even his co-stars got scared. Saddle up. This trail gets brutal fast.
Stewart, willing to pay any price to create a future that will hide.
Number 1. James Stewart didn't want to play Howard Kemp. He'd spent the last decade as the all-American everyman, the good guy you'd trust with your life, the moral center of every film he touched. But Anthony Mann saw something else, something buried beneath that aw-shucks smile. Darkness. Real darkness. Mann had directed Stewart in Winchester 73 and Bend of the River, slowly peeling back layers of the Stewart persona. But the Naked Spur was different. This wasn't a flawed hero. This was a man unraveling, consumed by greed, betrayal, and rage. Stewart read the script and hesitated. He told Mann, "The audience won't accept me like this." Mann didn't argue, he just said, "They need to." And Stewart, against every instinct that had made him a star, said yes. What followed wasn't just a performance, it was a dismantling of everything Stewart represented. The nice guy from It's a Wonderful Life was about to show America what happened when nice guys broke. And once cameras rolled in the Colorado wilderness, there was no turning back. Number 2.
Oh, I've seen him with women. He'll look and think.
Before the cameras ever rolled, MGM wanted to play it safe. They offered Anthony Mann studio sets, controlled lighting, painted backdrops of mountains that would cost less and cause zero headaches. Mann refused. He didn't want fake. He wanted real, dangerous real. So he took his entire cast and crew to the Rocky Mountains near Durango, Colorado, to locations accessible only by mule, where altitude sickness was common and weather could turn deadly in minutes. The studio panicked. They said it was reckless, unnecessary, a logistical nightmare that would blow the budget and potentially kill someone. Mann didn't budge. He knew that if the actors were comfortable, the film would be comfortable. And the Naked Spur was about 5 people at the edge of survival. Paranoid, desperate, trapped. You can't fake that in a soundstage. So MGM backed down, and Mann led his team into the wilderness. What they got wasn't just beautiful scenery, it was authentic suffering. Every stumble, every exhausted face, every moment of tension, it was real because the mountain made it real. And that decision, that stubborn refusal to compromise, turned a Western into something primal.
Stewart, fearless frontiersman, with an iron will that...
Number 3. James Stewart was afraid of horses, not uncomfortable, afraid. Despite making Westerns for years, he never fully trusted them. So when he arrived in Colorado and saw the terrain, steep cliffs, narrow trails, rocky drops with no guardrails, his fear kicked into overdrive. The production needed him to ride constantly, sometimes at speed, often on paths where one wrong step meant a fatal fall. Stewart did it anyway, but between takes, crew members noticed something strange. He'd dismount, walk away from the animal, and stand alone for several minutes, breathing hard, hands shaking. He never complained, never asked for a stunt double. But the fear was there, lurking just beneath the surface. And ironically, that fear bled into his performance. Howard Kemp was a man barely holding it together, a man one wrong move away from disaster. Stewart didn't have to act that part. He was living it. Every ride, every cliff, every scene on horseback was Stewart fighting his own terror. And that raw, unfiltered anxiety, it's in every frame. You can see it in his eyes. Because it wasn't acting, it was survival.
Janet Leigh, willing to defy any man strong enough to win it.
Number 4. Janet Leigh was MGM's golden girl. Elegant, polished, known for playing refined women in carefully lit close-ups. The Naked Spur was not that kind of movie. She signed on thinking it would be a romantic Western with some dramatic flair. Then she arrived on location and realized there were no dressing rooms, no makeup trailers, no hot water. She was expected to climb rocks, wade through freezing rivers, and sleep in a tent like everyone else. At first, she was furious. She'd come from the glamour of Hollywood, and now she was being treated like a stunt performer. But something shifted. As the shoot went on, Leigh stopped complaining and started embracing the chaos. She did her own stunts, refused to stand in for a dangerous river scene, and pushed herself harder than she ever had. Years later, she called it one of the most physically demanding roles of her career. And the irony? Her character Lena was supposed to be tough, resourceful, someone who could survive the wilderness. Lee wasn't acting. She was enduring. And that authenticity, you can't manufacture it. The Naked Spur demanded realness, and Lee gave it everything she had, even when it hurt.
Willing to make any deal to win a woman and escape the law.
Number 5. Robert Ryan played Ben Vandergroat, the charming outlaw who manipulates everyone around him. On paper, he was the villain. On set, he was the glue holding everything together. While Stewart brooded between takes and Lee battled exhaustion, Ryan kept morale up with jokes, stories, and an easygoing presence that made the brutal shoot bearable. He never complained about the cold, never griped about the altitude, never asked for special treatment. But Ryan had a secret. He was in constant pain. Years of boxing in his youth had left him with chronic back problems, and the physical demands of the role, climbing, fighting, riding, aggravated old injuries. He never told man. He just gritted through it, popping aspirin like candy and hiding the pain behind that easy smile. Crew members only found out later, after filming wrapped, when Ryan admitted he'd spent most of the shoot in agony. He said he didn't want to slow things down or make it about him, but the truth is, Ryan's performance, that calm, controlled menace, was partly fueled by his ability to mask suffering. He was playing a man who hid his true nature beneath charm, and in real life, he was hiding pain beneath professionalism, art imitating life in the worst possible way. Number 6. Millard Mitchell played Jesse Tate, the grizzled old prospector who joined Stewart's manhunt. He was a character actor with decades of experience, a pro who could deliver a line in his sleep. But during production, something was wrong. Mitchell was losing weight, looking gaunt, moving slower than usual. The cast and crew assumed it was the altitude or the grueling schedule. It wasn't. Mitchell was dying. He had lung cancer, though he didn't know it yet. The symptoms were there, the fatigue, the shortness of breath, the weight loss, but no diagnosis had been made. He pushed through every scene, delivering one of the most memorable performances in the film. His character's death scene, where he's shot and collapses in the wilderness, carried an eerie weight because Mitchell was already fading. Less than a year after The Naked Spur was released, Millard Mitchell was dead at 50. His final performance was in a film about men chasing money while death chased them. And unknowingly, he was racing death himself. Watching the film now, knowing what was coming, it's impossible not to see the shadow behind his eyes. The Naked Spur was his last ride. He just didn't know it. Number 7. The script for The Naked Spur was lean, tight, only 90 pages for a 91-minute film. Almost no excess dialogue, no wasted scenes. But what made it unusual was the structure. The entire story takes place over a few days with only 5 characters and no real locations beyond the wilderness. It was essentially a stage play on horseback, a chamber drama in the mountains. Writer Sam Rolfe and Harold Jack Bloom stripped away everything typical westerns relied on. No towns, no saloons, no cavalry rescue, no big showdown at high noon. Just 5 people, each with their own agenda, trapped together in the wild. It was risky. Audiences in 1953 expected action, spectacle, clear heroes and villains. The Naked Spur gave them paranoia, greed, and moral ambiguity. MGM was nervous. They worried it was too small, too psychological, too dark for mainstream audiences. They pushed for rewrites, for added scenes, for anything to make it more conventional. Anthony Mann refused. He knew the intimacy was the point, the isolation was the point, and when the film was released, critics called it one of the most intense westerns ever made. Not because of what it added, but because of what it took away.
Willing to betray friend or foe for love or money. Millard.
Number 8. Ralph Meeker played Roy Anderson, a disgraced Union soldier turned opportunist. He was brash, cocky, and desperate to prove himself in Hollywood. This was one of his early roles, and he wanted to make an impression, so he took risks, big ones. During a fight scene on a rocky cliff, Meeker improvised a stunt where he'd leap across a gap between boulders. The crew hadn't rigged it. There was no safety net, no rehearsal. Meeker just did it mid-take without warning. He landed hard, stumbled, nearly went over the edge. Anthony Mann yelled cut, furious. He tore into Meeker, told him never to pull a stunt like that again, that he could have died and shut down the entire production. Meeker apologized, but the damage was done. The take was unusable, and the crew had to reset the entire scene. But Meeker didn't learn. Days later, during a horseback chase, he spurred his horse faster than planned, racing ahead of Stewart and nearly colliding with a camera rig. This time, Mann pulled him aside and made it clear. One more stunt and he was off the film. Meeker backed down, but his recklessness wasn't just youthful arrogance. It was desperation. He knew this was his shot, and he was willing to risk everything, including his life, to stand out. Ironically, his character Roy is a man driven by greed and ego, willing to betray anyone to get ahead. Meeker wasn't acting. He was channeling his own hunger, and it nearly killed him. Number 9. The river scene where Janet Leigh's character Lena falls into the rapids wasn't supposed to happen. The script called for her to slip on wet rocks near the water's edge, get her feet wet. Nothing major. But during the take, the current was stronger than anyone anticipated. Leigh stepped onto a rock, lost her footing, and went in. The water was glacial runoff, freezing cold, and the current pulled her downstream fast. She thrashed, tried to stand, but the rocks were too slippery. Stewart, still in character, dove in after her, grabbing her arm and dragging her toward the shore. It wasn't scripted, it was instinct. Mann kept the cameras rolling. The panic on Leigh's face, the terror in Stewart's eyes, it was all real. When they finally pulled her out, she was shaking uncontrollably, hypothermic, gasping for air. The crew wrapped her in blankets, rushed her to a tent, and called for medical evaluation. She was fine, just shaken and freezing, but Mann kept the take. And it's in the movie, that moment where Lena nearly drowns, where Kemp pulls her out, desperate and terrified. It's not acting. It's a near-death experience caught on film, and audiences never knew. Number 10. Halfway through production, the weather turned. A freak spring snowstorm hit the Rockies, dumping 2 feet of snow overnight and dropping temperatures below freezing. The crew was stranded. No way up the mountain, no way down. They had 3 days of supplies and no heat except campfires. MGM wanted to shut down, evacuate, and return when conditions improved, but Mann refused. He knew if they stopped, they'd lose momentum, lose the location, maybe lose the film entirely. So they kept shooting, in the snow, in the cold, in conditions no one was prepared for. The actors wore layers under their costumes, shivering between takes. The cameras kept jamming from the cold. Film stock had to be warmed by body heat before loading. And through it all, they kept working. Some of the film's most tense, desperate scenes were shot during that storm. You can see the cold in the actors' breath, the exhaustion in their faces. It wasn't manufactured, it was survival. And when the storm finally cleared, the crew descended the mountain battered, frostbitten, and changed. The Naked Spur wasn't just a movie anymore, it was an endurance test. And everyone who made it through knew they'd survived something rare. Number 11. The film's most famous scene, where Stewart's character Kemp has a complete emotional breakdown, wasn't in the original script. It was added during production after Anthony Mann noticed something disturbing. Stewart was carrying the character home with him. Between takes, he'd sit alone, staring at nothing, lost in Kemp's bitterness and rage. One night, Mann found him outside his tent at 2 a.m., just standing in the dark, silent. Mann asked if he was okay. Stewart didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I don't know how to turn him off." Mann realized Stewart had gone too deep, so deep he was losing himself in the character. So Mann made a choice. Instead of pulling Stewart back, he pushed him further. He rewrote a scene to give Kemp a moment of complete collapse, where all the pain, all the betrayal, everything he'd been holding inside would explode. The next day, they filmed it. Stewart screamed, sobbed, shook with genuine anguish. The crew stood frozen. Some looked away. Janet Leigh later said it was the most uncomfortable she'd ever felt on a set because it didn't feel like acting. It felt like watching a man break. And when Mann finally called cut, Stewart walked off into the woods alone and didn't come back for an hour. When he returned, he was quiet, drained, but something had shifted. He'd purged Kemp from his system. And what made it onto film was one of the rawest, most vulnerable moments in Western cinema. Not because it was written, because it was necessary. Number 12. The Naked Spur had no musical score for most of its runtime. Composer Bronislaw Kaper was hired to create a traditional Western soundtrack, sweeping orchestral pieces that would underscore the drama and action. He composed several themes, recorded them, and presented them to Anthony Mann. Mann listened, then rejected almost everything. He told Caper the film didn't need music. The silence was the music. The wind, the rivers, the creaking leather, the labored breathing, that was the score. Caper was furious. He'd spent weeks composing, and now Mann was telling him to strip it all away. But Mann was adamant. He wanted the audience to feel the isolation, the emptiness, the suffocating tension between the characters. Music would comfort them. Silence would trap them. So Caper went back and created one of the sparsest Western scores ever recorded. Long stretches with no music at all, just the sounds of the wilderness. And when music did appear, it was brief, minimal, almost ghostly. The result was unsettling. Audiences weren't used to Westerns that felt this empty, this quiet. But that emptiness became the film's signature. The Naked Spur didn't sound like other Westerns. It sounded like dread. Number 13. During a climactic fight scene near a waterfall, James Stewart and Robert Ryan were supposed to stage a carefully choreographed brawl. Punches pulled, falls planned, everything controlled. But something went wrong. In the heat of the moment, Stewart threw a punch that actually connected, catching Ryan hard on the jaw. Ryan staggered, shocked, then came back swinging. What was supposed to be fake suddenly became real. They grappled, slipped on wet rocks, crashed into the water. The crew yelled for them to stop, but neither man could hear over the roar of the waterfall. Anthony Mann was screaming, waving his arms, trying to get their attention. Finally, a crew member physically stepped between them, pulling them apart. Both men stood there, soaking wet, breathing hard, staring at each other. Then Ryan started laughing. He said, "Took you long enough, Jim." Stewart, still shaking with adrenaline, smiled. The tension broke, but Mann was livid. He pulled both actors aside and tore into them, told them they could have broken bones or worse. But when he watched the footage later, he changed his mind. The raw violence, the desperation, the lack of control, it was exactly what the scene needed, so he kept it. And that fight, where two professionals momentarily lost control and fought for real, became one of the most brutal moments in the film. Not because it was choreographed, because it wasn't. Number 14. Ralph Meeker's character, Roy Anderson, was supposed to die halfway through the film, shot during a confrontation with Ben Vandergroat. But test audiences hated it, not because they liked Roy, but because they didn't understand why he died so suddenly. MGM ordered reshoots to extend his role, give him more screen time, make his death feel earned. Anthony Mann refused. He said Roy's death was supposed to be abrupt, meaningless, the way real death happens. No dramatic buildup, no final words, just gone. The studio pushed back. They threatened to recut the film without Mann's approval. Mann called their bluff and said if they changed his cut, he'd walk and take his name off the picture. It was a massive risk. Directors didn't have the power they have today, and studios could destroy careers over insubordination. But Mann held firm. Finally, a compromise was reached. They'd add one scene, a brief moment where Roy's greed becomes more apparent, giving his death slightly more context. Mann agreed, shot the scene in one day, and the studio backed off. The death stayed abrupt, and Mann kept his vision intact. But it was a reminder that even in the wilderness, far from the studio system, MGM's control still reached him, and he had to fight for every frame. Number 15. The film's title, The Naked Spur, confused everyone. Studio executives asked what it meant. Test audiences said it sounded sexual. Even the cast wasn't sure. Anthony Mann never explained it directly, but the symbolism was clear to those who looked. A spur is a tool of control used to drive a horse forward, often painfully. Naked means exposed, vulnerable, stripped of protection. The title wasn't about a literal object. It was about the characters. 5 people, each using and manipulating the others, driving each other toward destruction, all of them exposed, defenseless against their own greed and desperation. Howard Kemp uses everyone to get his bounty. Ben Vandergroat manipulates everyone to escape. Roy, Jesse, and Lena, they're all being driven by invisible spurs, pushed by forces they can barely control. The wilderness strips away their facades, leaves them naked in every sense. The title wasn't meant to be understood immediately. It was meant to linger, to reveal itself slowly as the story unfolded. MGM wanted to change it to something clearer, something marketable. Mann refused. And decades later, The Naked Spur remains one of the most evocative, mysterious titles in Western cinema, not despite its ambiguity, because of it. Number 16. There's a scene where James Stewart's character Kemp stands at the edge of a cliff, staring down at a valley thousands of feet below. The shot is framed so you see his face, the drop, and nothing else. It's terrifying, and it was real. Stewart was standing on an actual cliff edge with no safety harness, no net, no protection. One strong gust of wind or one misstep, and he'd have plunged to his death. Anthony Mann wanted the shot for authenticity, but the crew was horrified. They begged him to use a double, to build a platform, to do anything other than risk the star's life. Stewart, despite his fear of horses and heights, said he'd do it. He stepped to the edge, the cameras rolled, and for 15 seconds he stood there frozen, staring into the void. When Mann called cut, Stewart stepped back and his legs gave out. He sat down hard, pale, shaking. A crew member brought him water. He drank it without speaking, then walked away. Nobody followed. That night, Janet Leigh asked him why he did it. Stewart said, because Kemp would have. He wasn't interested in being safe. He was interested in being real. And that shot, that moment of genuine peril, it's one of the most haunting images in the film, because everyone watching knew. One wrong move, and it would have been James Stewart's last scene ever filmed. Number 17. The final confrontation between Stewart and Ryan was filmed in one continuous take. No cuts, no edits, just two actors battling across rocky terrain for nearly 4 minutes of screen time. It was a logistical nightmare. The camera had to follow them over uneven ground. The sound had to capture every word despite wind and water, and both actors had to hit their marks perfectly while making it look spontaneous. They rehearsed for 2 days, mapping every step, every punch, every line. Then, on the day of shooting, they threw it all away. Mann told them to forget the choreography and just react. He wanted chaos, not precision. So they did it, and it was brutal. Stewart and Ryan stumbled, actually hit each other more than once, improvised lines when they forgot the script. The camera operator struggled to keep up, nearly dropping the equipment twice, and through it all, Mann kept rolling. He didn't call cut until the scene reached its natural conclusion, both men exhausted, bloodied, finished. When it was over, the crew erupted in applause. They just witnessed something rare. Two masters of their craft pushing each other to the absolute limit with no safety net. The take was kept in its entirety, and watching it now, you can feel the exhaustion, the desperation, the finality, because it wasn't manufactured, it was earned. Number 18. The Naked Spur premiered in February 1953 to mixed reviews. Critics didn't know what to make of it. It was too dark for a Western, too sparse for a drama, too psychological for mainstream audiences. Some called it brilliant, others called it slow, depressing, pointless. Box office was modest, not a bomb, but not a hit. MGM considered it a disappointment and quickly moved on to other projects. Anthony Mann was frustrated, but not surprised. He knew the film was ahead of its time, that audiences in 1953 weren't ready for a Western where the hero was broken and morally compromised. But something strange happened over the years. Film critics revisited it. Students studied it. Filmmakers cited it as an influence. And slowly, The Naked Spur transformed from a forgotten B-Western into a masterpiece. By the 1970s, it was being taught in film schools. By the 1980s, it was considered one of the greatest Westerns ever made. And by the 2000s, it had been preserved by the National Film Registry as culturally significant. The film that flopped in 1953 became legendary by waiting, because great art doesn't demand immediate recognition. It earns it over time, and The Naked Spur earned every bit of its legacy. Number 19. James Stewart never watched The Naked Spur, not at the premiere, not at home, not ever. When asked why, he gave different answers over the years. Sometimes he said he didn't like watching himself on screen. Other times he said he was too busy. But in a rare interview decades later, he admitted the real reason. He said making the film had taken something from him, something he couldn't quite name, a piece of his optimism, a sliver of his faith in happy endings. He said Howard Kemp was still inside him somewhere, buried but present, and he didn't want to confront that version of himself again. Stewart had built a career playing decent men, heroes you could believe in. The Naked Spur forced him to play a man consumed by bitterness and greed, a man capable of terrible things. And even though Kemp finds redemption at the end, Stewart couldn't shake the darkness he'd inhabited. Co-stars noticed he was different after the film, quieter, more withdrawn. Anthony Mann said Stewart emerged from The Naked Spur as a deeper actor, but a more troubled man. And maybe that was the cost. Great performances demand sacrifice. and Stewart sacrificed a part of himself he never fully got back. The film made him a better artist, but it changed him forever. Number 20. During the final week of shooting, a wildfire broke out in the valley below their location. The smoke was visible for miles, and authorities ordered an evacuation of the entire area. The film was one day away from completion. One scene left to shoot. Anthony Mann refused to leave. He told the crew anyone who wanted to evacuate could go, but he was staying to finish. The studio frantically called, demanding they shut down immediately. Mann ignored them. James Stewart, Janet Leigh, and Robert Ryan stayed with him. So did most of the crew. They worked through the night, racing against the approaching fire, smoke filling the air, ash falling like snow. The final scene, where Kemp decides to bury Ben instead of collecting the bounty, was shot in near darkness with only portable lights. The smoke added an eerie, apocalyptic quality to the footage. When they wrapped, just after dawn, the fire was less than 2 miles away. They packed up in minutes and evacuated down the mountain, barely making it out before the road was closed. The location where they'd spent weeks filming was consumed by flames within hours. Nothing remained, and that final scene, shot in the shadow of destruction, carries a weight that's impossible to fake, because they weren't just filming the end of a story. They were racing the end of everything, and somehow, impossibly, they finished. The Naked Spur was complete, and the mountain took its last revenge the moment they left. Bonus fact. After filming wrapped, the cast went their separate ways, but James Stewart kept one item from the set: the leather satchel his character carries throughout the film, the one containing the fictional bounty money. He never explained why he took it. He never displayed it. But years later, his daughter found it in a closet, still dusty, still marked with fake blood from the final scene. Inside was a handwritten note in Stewart's handwriting. It said, "This was the price. I hope it was worth it." Nobody knows what he meant. The bounty, the performance, the toll the film took on him. Stewart never clarified, and the note remained private until after his death. But it's a haunting reminder that some roles cost more than others. And for James Stewart, the Naked Spur was the most expensive part he ever played. Not in money, in something far more valuable.